Welcome to the UNCDF webinar on driving digital transformation in LDCs. My name is Sabine Mensah. I'm the regional lead, inclusive digital economy in West and Central Africa, and I am your host today. In today's webinar, we would like to discuss how the digital transformation in LDCs is contributing to the COVID-19 response and how this transformation is preparing the foundation for inclusive digital economies. Before we start, I would like to give you some logistical details. This webinar is hosted in Zoom, will be recorded, so you can always come back to it or share it with your colleagues and network. If you have issues with the system, you can chat with it and we will be able to help you. For your questions to the panelists, please use the Q&A function. My colleagues Karima and Lysandra will be collating all the questions for the end of the webinar. So allow me to share with you today's speakers in the order of appearances. Mrs. Judith Carl, UNCDF Executive Secretary. Mr. Henri Domel, UNCDF Director for Inclusive Finance. Honorary Judith Nabakuba, Minister of ICT, National Guidance of Uganda. Mr. Omar Sise, CEO of InTouch, an African fintech. Mrs. Bettina Etter, Senior Migration Global Governance for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. To open today's session, it is my pleasure to give the floor to our Executive Secretary, Judith Carl, who will share some opening remarks. Judith? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sabine. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. I see a lot of participants are still coming on board, and we welcome all of you and welcome this discussion. This is a first in a series of webinars that we will be hosting in the coming weeks. And really they're intended to provide insights and to give us a forum for some thought-provoking discussions on issues where we at UNCDF are actively supporting the world's least developed countries to address the COVID-19 crisis. The series is meant to convene partners and leaders who are advancing the COVID-19 response to allow them to share their experiences and to illustrate sound and effective interventions. We're very, very grateful for the presence of the Honorable Minister from Uganda, all of our partners, and all of our attendees. These are extraordinarily challenging times for all of us, in particular for the vulnerable populations in developing economies and LDCs. Supporting the LDCs to respond to the crisis is both crucial and requires significant and urgent action, also unprecedented action. The first priority must be to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 and make sure the LDCs don't fall further behind in achieving the SDGs because of this crisis. We have all experienced how important digital solutions can be in helping us to cope with the crisis, and many of these solutions are critical to reducing impacts in LDCs as well. Examples: digital payments linked to social safety nets, digital solutions to provide health services, education and contact tracing, and e-commerce innovations to keep SMEs afloat. These transformational solutions are also crucial for the medium to long-term aim to build LDC societies and economies that are less vulnerable and more resilient to deal with future shocks. They're also important to be able to seize on new opportunities to address long-standing exclusions and issues of leaving no one behind in the SDG agenda. We know that the emergence of broader, inclusive digital economies can be critical to help advance the SDGs, including in sectors like energy, agriculture, water and sanitation, education, and health. But LDCs that are excluded from these solutions will clearly miss out on benefiting from both the immediate response and the opportunities for the longer-term recovery and development. One of the ways that UNCDF makes finance work for the poor in LDCs is by promoting inclusive digital finance and inclusive economies that expand the opportunity for individuals, households, small and medium-sized enterprises to participate in their local economies. Making this happen requires public policies that enable the full inclusive potential of digital technologies while addressing exclusion, as well as the development of digital infrastructure and the ecosystems of public and private actors that drive innovation. To support LDCs in this endeavor, we launched our new strategy last year, Leaving No One Behind in the Digital Era, to help LDCs bring digital solutions to scale. This strategy builds on years of experience in digital financial inclusion that has helped connect 18 million people to financial ecosystems over recent years. Guided by this digital strategy, we are looking to equip millions of people in over 20 LDCs in East and West Africa, Asia, and the Pacific to use innovative digital services in their daily lives that will empower them to contribute to the SDGs. Our work in this space also involves the Better Than Cash Alliance, a global partnership focused on accelerating the transition from cash to digital payments, which we host at UNCDF. In 2019, the Alliance expanded its membership to 30 national governments, 34 international organizations, and 8 global businesses while continuing to support its members to meet their digitalization commitments. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis, the Alliance has seen a surge of requests as its government members have accelerated their digitization journey to be able to pay citizens while they're still under lockdown. UNCDF has also served as the Secretariat for the United Nations Secretary General's Task Force on Digital Financing for the Sustainable Development Goals, a task force co-chaired by the UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner and the former CEO of ABSA Bank, Maria Ramos. There we established partnerships with task force members to pilot innovative solutions leveraging digital financing. The forthcoming report of the task force will provide a useful blueprint for how digital finance can help build resilience and drive progress on the SDGs. We leverage our expertise and initiatives on digital economies to help LDCs tackle the impacts of COVID. Currently, we actively support 20 digital responses to COVID, which includes several initiatives featuring our fellow presenters here today. These interventions that we will share today are demonstrating how digital transformations are driving COVID responses in LDCs. And the question for today's webinar is how can we leverage this new reality to unlock the potential for inclusive and sustainable economic transformation in LDCs and into the future. We look forward to hearing the discussion. Thank you all for your interest and your participation. And with that, Sabine, let me hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, for framing this session, and thank you for your opening remarks. Now I would like to give the floor to Henri Domel, our Director for Inclusive Finance. Over to you, Henri.
Thank you, Sabine, and thank you, Judith, for framing our discussion today. To give more context to digital transformation, I would like to tell you about the story of 2 people our team met in Senegal and Benin recently. And their story, I believe, provide a concrete example of how digital transformation is impacting people's lives. So let's start with Birangai, a young agent in Senegal. Back in 2015, he was facing a difficult choice: to keep living in his father's house in a rural village in Senegal, or to move to the city. Moving to the city was a choice that 3/4 of local men, including his brothers, had already done because there was no job in his village. However, Biran had something his brother didn't have yet at that time, a mobile phone, which his brothers in Dakar topped up with airtime. And that gave Biran the opportunity to start his small business, selling airtime to other villagers. As he grew more and more successful with his reselling business, he realized that he might actually have literally in his hand the job opportunity that he was looking for. And he was not the only one to notice that. With some training and coaching by a super agent, Biran became a very successful agent serving his close community and beyond, in his village. So that business opportunity for Biran really transformed his life. Maybe let's go to the other example, the next slide. So this is Henriette Folly, and she's from Benin. She's what we call a micro entrepreneur. And here again, her mobile phone played a critical role in changing her life. It helped us to really transform her existing business as a grain wholesaler. As she shifted from physical cash to digital transaction to pay her loan and her suppliers, she realized that she could make tremendous savings in time and money that she didn't have to spend anymore in transportation to meet her supplier in the north of Benin, and time because she didn't have to travel and queue to pay back her loan and bills. So with these savings enabled by digital transaction, she changed her business model and moved her business, which used to be hidden in the backyard of her house, to the front of her house. And she tremendously also expanded her business thanks to the saving that she realized. So for me, these two stories really illustrate how mobile money and digital services can really profoundly transform the life of the people that we serve through our program. So I will stop there. And after these two illustrations of what these digital transformation actually mean for people in the countries where we work, I will pass it back to you, Sabine.
Thank you, Henri. You know, it's stories like Pierret's, stories of transformative impact that digital finance can bring in the life of vulnerable people that drives us every day. Inclusion in the digital era is not a given. When we are working on digital transformation and technology, we need to make sure that it does not lead to further exclusion of the most vulnerable one. At UNCDF, our vision is to promote inclusive digital economies that leave no one behind. And our goal is to equip millions of people to use innovative digital services in their daily lives that would empower them and also contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. You will see how our approach is anchored around 4 key work streams. The first one is really focused on empowering vulnerable customers. How we work with our partners, government, private sector, vocational training organizations, NGOs, and development partners to facilitate access to information, coaching, knowledge sharing, and skills building platforms to empower customers to use digital services and have better access to training, to financial education, to digital literacy, digital entrepreneurship through digital channels. The second work stream for this strategy and how it comes into play, it's really focused on inclusive innovation. It's interestingly enough, a lot of people have asked me, why inclusive innovation? Why not just innovation? Well, for us, inclusive innovation are those that are specifically designed for customers at the bottom of the pyramid. And it starts with the customer's challenge towards a solution, and not the other way around, necessarily a solution that we try to sell to the customer. So for us, by increasing the use of a wider range of services, targeting population who can integrate these digital services into their daily life to improve their financial management skills, to enhance their farming practices for smallholder farmers, for instance, to get more information about potential employment opportunities for youth, to learn how to grow their business, improve the knowledge on market conditions and also commodity prices, and ultimately leveraging all these tools and services to improve their income, create new jobs and economic opportunities within their communities. That's what we strive towards with inclusive innovation workstream. The third workstream is dedicated to driving universal access to the digital payment ecosystem, which we believe is a key building block of a digital economy. Our experience have shown that a strong digital ecosystem infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, especially through last mile agent network, can drive active usage of digital finance and can provide the means to vulnerable population to engage in the beginning of their financial inclusion and empowerment journey. And the fourth work stream relates to the creation of an enabling policy and regulatory environment. Global policymakers and experts today increasingly recognize digital technology as a prime driver of innovation in finance and also in many other sectors. It is important that the policy environment is continuously adapted, taking into account new data insights to remove potential barriers for innovators, while at the same time providing a healthy and adequate environment for strong customer protection. So we strive to work with all stakeholders, from the financial, telecom, competition regulator, to governments and development partners, to develop policies and to work on a regulatory environment that support the incubation of inclusive digital economies that leave no one behind. And as we are working toward that digital transformation path, we believe in evidence-based policymaking. We are as good as what we measure. So allow me to introduce to you IDES, the Inclusive Digital Economies Scorecard. IDES is a strategic policy tool that government can use. IDES is a policy tool that governments can use as they are mapping the digital transformation journey. This tool can help government in setting up the priorities in the digital transformation and also measuring progress that's made towards the objectives of the government in their digital transformation strategy. So UNCDF has invested for over a decade in building the rails of digital finance inclusion and also digital rails in over 25 LDCs that include both Uganda and Senegal. Both countries have gone through quite a digital transformation journey in their own ways, and we've worked with both countries with public and private sector. So it's an honor for me today to really open the floor to our guest, starting with Honorary Judith Nabakuba, Minister of ICT and National Guidance for Uganda. Minister, I have 3 questions for you, and maybe perhaps let's start with the first one. Can you tell us about the state of the digital transformation in Uganda and how digital transformation is supporting the response to COVID-19 pandemic? Over to you.
She needs to unmute.
Honorary Minister, can you please unmute your mic? Would you like me to repeat the first question? Perhaps we're having difficulties.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are, absolutely.
Yes, thank you, moderator and the conveners for the meeting. I welcome you again to the new norm of online meetings. Of course, you've asked me about the state of digital transformation in Uganda. I would begin by saying that technology is bridging the distance to enable business continuity in Uganda. Today's topic couldn't have come at a better time than this, when we have to rely on ICT for service delivery, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Back in the days, people spoke about ICT, webs. We did not realize the collaborative technologies that they would be very significant in the development, in the different delivery of the services. Uganda ICT sector has grown steadily over the years, thanks to the increasing demand of the mobile broadband services. The coverage of mobile broadband is at 90% as we speak now, and thanks to the private sector interventions. Key to digital transformation is the infrastructure. Government has increased the ICT infrastructure in order to improve connectivity throughout the country, but also to support government across the country. We have laid the national fiber optic in most parts of the country. And to date, we have about 50 districts that have access to the NBI, but also some MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies are also connected to the NBI. The NBI supports government ministries, the departments and agencies to provide what we call the e-services. We have about 100 online e-services. They are provided by government. We can take an example of the e-passport, the e-visa, the e-FISMIS, the e-tax by the URA, the e-procurement, and also e-business registration, the pension management, the refugee management system. There are a number of services that have been developed to support government in one way or another. And the implementation of the ICT agenda is guided by the Digital Uganda vision that, when implemented, will empower citizens to strive to achieve the goals of universal inclusion, sustainable development, and Digital Uganda Vision provides a unified direction for ICT and aligns the ICT investment in various sectors to improve the country's global ICT initiatives. And if you look at the digital vision which I'm talking about, you realize that currently the ministry is further spearheading the development of the fourth industrial revolution strategy, which focuses on the use of the fourth industrial revolution technologies to enhance all aspects of the economy. Uganda's National Planning Authority, Government of Uganda, has also mainstreamed ICT in National Development Plan 3. And the NDP, the National Development Plan, stipulates the country's medium-term strategic direction, development, priorities, but also implementation strategies. We have seen the role of the UNCDF in building the rails in the public sector. And in this regard, allow me to acknowledge the technical support from the UNCDF to the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance in the development of the tool for measuring the impact of the innovation support and also support towards the developing of the national ICT innovation ecosystem, in addition to the technical assistance given to us as a ministry generally. Looking at how the digital transformation is supporting the response towards the COVID-19, there are a number of applications that have been developed by the ministry and InTouch. You realize that digital technology and transformation is very key in the fight against COVID-19. In Uganda, allow me in a special way to thank our President, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who has been at the forefront of fighting against the pandemic, the spread of the pandemic. And he has put in place different mechanisms to curb the spread of this virus. And he's very supportive of our sector. And if you heard during his State of the Nation address and also his address during the budget speech, he came out clearly on ICT and how he thinks ICT is going to drive Uganda's economy in one way or another. Digital technologies also provide unprecedented solutions to address challenges of COVID-19. Government has developed the COVID-19 National Task Force Surveillance System to enable us do registration of persons of interest, like the recent entrance into Uganda, but also monitor those who have been quarantined, inform them of the expiry date of their quarantine, and it gives timely information to Ministry of Information, but also Ministry of Health for quick response. There is a portal that was developed, which is called the COVID-19 portal. It's like a one-stop center. The media, members of the public, accesses that portal to get any available information related to COVID-19. We can also talk about the casework force pulse. This one is mainly for the Ministry of Health. It helps the Ministry of Health to fast track the health workers, especially those who are at the front line, to know what decisions they are making, but also what requirements do they need in terms of supplies, among others. We have been in position now to have members, especially in government, put on Zoom, meaning that people can operate remotely from their homes using Zoom. Meetings are held, things are coordinated online, and to us, it's a big development in government. We have also seen the grant of exemption on some of the regulatory requirements to facilitate the industry support to the COVID-19 campaign. Temporary exemptions were granted in respect to some of the regulatory requirements on multimedia messaging services to allow the telecom operators to support the Ministry of Health with callback tunes, but also messages to members of the public to tell them of what interventions have been put in place by government. And government also designated and granted temporary authorization for the use of code 919 to COVID-19 to facilitate ease of use to the members of the public, especially when they are making inquiries to the call center for services related to COVID-19, UCC, which is Uganda Communications Commission, also temporarily assigned the Ministry of Health the code 919 for the operation of the COVID-19 call center services. And we have received a number of calls in relation to COVID-19 inquiries, and the Ministry of Health has been in position to respond to the respective calls. We are also seeing provision of a consumer advisory on the online safety. The ministry, through the Uganda Communications Commission, has continued also to issue advisories to consumers of communication services online safety practices. These advisories have been issued to protect the public from harmful practices like corona-themed cyber attacks, online fraud, but also phishing, among others. The Ministry of ICT, through the Initiative Support Program, which is called INISP, we are supporting innovations that are geared towards the prevention of COVID-19. This shows government commitment of using ICT in socio-economic transformation, and I'm happy that we are partnering with UNCDF in promotion of digital transformation in Uganda. The government of Uganda has encouraged the use of mobile money and other digital financial services for local transactions. We are now seeing even e-commerces where people can order goods, all things, even food, online, and then that food can be delivered in their homes without even moving physically to the markets, which is a new thing. We have also seen the transport sector now embracing the digitalization, whereby one can order for an Uber or a boda from wherever they are, and that boda will be in position to pick the goods from where they want the goods to be picked from, and then delivered to where they want the goods to be delivered to. We believe that there is a lot that can be done with the digital transformation. And we also, as a ministry, we are committed to make sure that at least we increase on the digital literacy among Ugandans to enable them appreciate that this is the new normal, this is the way we go, this is the new way to go, and this is the new way to drive our agenda as Ugandans, and also to connect with other people elsewhere, like I'm doing right now. You realize that I'm getting information from my office, and I've been in position to learn a lot from the cases that have been presented previously. And I believe that together we will be in position to make a way forward, but also progress as far as digital transformation is concerned in Uganda. And I once again thank you for the opportunity to allow me share with you our progress as far as digital transformation is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorary Minister Judith Nabakuba, for this quite impressive journey of Uganda. And I have to say, we at UNCDF and in the different country teams have been inspired by Uganda in the digital transformation, and we've used a lot of the learnings from our teams in Uganda and the work that they have done with you, and how we've partnered together with ride-sharing services such as Safe Boda to launch an e-commerce platform to support local vendors, as well as facilitate foods and good delivery in response to the moratorium on public transportation due to the pandemic. So those are great examples, and I would like to thank you very much for your time and sharing these with us. Now, allow me to continue our journey towards Western Africa, and I would like to start the chart with UNCDF private sector partner in Senegal, InTouch. And we have the pleasure to have with us today the CEO of this African fintech, Omar Cissé. Omar, welcome to the webinar with us. I have 3 questions for you, and if you allow me, I'll ask the first one and then pursue with the other 2. Can you share with us briefly the digital journey of InTouch? Over to you, Omar.
Thank you very much, Sabine. Sorry, I could not activate the mic. Thank you for having me on this important meeting. InTouch is a company we launched in November 2015. We aggregate mainly means of payment and digital services for merchants and some corporate clients. We mainly help our clients to deal with all digital services, providers, money transfer, airtime, bill payment, etc. Using a single app. So they have a single account, a single app, and a single interlocutor, which is InTouch. We started from Senegal, and today we are covering 8 new other countries, including Mali, Burkina, Guinea-Conakry, Kenya, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and yesterday we had our first transactions in Uganda. We are up to date to launch by the end of this year up to 10 new countries from the north to the south. So our aim is to be able to cover all Africa, and today we are working with more than 20,000 merchants and more than 200 corporates.
Wow, those are amazing statistics. Can you share with us how you better serve a rural population with financial services and how this impacts jobs in rural areas? Omar?
Sure. As you may know, the bancarization rate in Africa is really very low. A big part of the population remain financially excluded. Fortunately, Sub-Saharan Africa is today the epicenter of mobile money, adding more than 50 million new registered accounts in 2019, which is a very, very big growth compared to the other years. And it's not only now in East Africa that we have mobile money, but everywhere. Even in West Africa, last year you could have 20 million new accounts, according to GSMA. So it is spreading everywhere in Africa, and it is getting bigger and bigger. Regarding financial services, the main challenges in rural areas are related to access to services. Ease of access to mobile money is still key to account adoption, and deepening financial inclusion and mobile money agents provide a convenient and trusted way to convert cash to digital value and vice versa. They are critical on the process because they help onboard people, they educate people, they help them do cash in, they help them do cash out, and they also help them do mobile payments if needed. So these are critical parts of the ecosystem of payment. And when it comes to, for example, a country like Senegal, when you compare the city of Dakar to the rural regions, the last statistics we have are saying that in the city, 31% of people have access to an account, while when it comes to rural regions, it's only 10%. So the difference is very high. So we decided with the UNCDF, thanks to UNCDF for that. UNCDF, we worked with UNCDF in a program to be able to improve access to digital services in rural area. In 2018, we started the program. UNCDF selected 10 regions in Senegal where access to digital services were a big challenge because of lack of agents. This region had a total of less than 500 agents for more than 2 million inhabitants. It means that they had one agent for more than 4,000 inhabitants. Within this program, MM4P, Mobile Money for Power of UNCDF, the plan was to create more than 300 new agents. It would mean that we would have one agent for 2,500 if we consider all the agents that would be in the region. So we succeeded together to create more than 368 new agents in the region. These agents succeeded to perform more than 900,000 transactions within a year in 2019, which represent an increase compared to 2018 when we launched the program, which represented a growth of more than 80% from one year to another year. And it was 6 million euros transaction only within a year, with these new agents that we succeeded to create. And what is important for this program also, it was that one of the aim it was to be able to continue the program, to continue with this agent sustaining the ecosystem even after the program. So this growth enlightened the sustainability of this kind of program. And today we are working with MM4P on the next phases to be able to work with more 200 young people we have to work with, and for these young people we have to build them a career on the ecosystem of payment, trying to help them be, for example, being a wholesaler if they were agent, or having franchise, etc. So we are trying to work on this program. Thanks to UNCDF for this great program, which created many jobs and which was able to build a strong financial ecosystem in these areas where access to digital services was a big challenge before.
Thank you very much, Omar, for driving financial inclusion in rural area, but also sharing with us that digital payment as a sector itself can provide economic opportunities for youth to be agents themselves, increase their economic opportunity, but also to be change agent within their communities by promoting digital financial services, particularly in this pandemic times where we've had preventive measures in most of the countries where we are promoting distanciation. I'm curious to know how, the current crisis has impacted your business as well as the agents that you have onboarded into this ecosystem. If you can share with us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for example, we can say that when the pandemic started in a country like Senegal, it scared us a bit. It scared us a bit. The first 2 weeks were very challenging for us because it's coincided with the time when we put everyone on remote work, and in most countries, government was starting to issue partial or full lockdowns. But it did not last, fortunately for us. Based on the first few days, we expected to have up to 65% drop in volume in July, because it started to reduce volume drastically the first weeks. Finally, we had only 7% decrease in April, and May had been our best month ever. June is also being better than May, so we are quite happy with that. Fortunately, we also signed during this period more than 100 of contracts with corporates, allowing them to accept the payments because in this period, people are more and more now using a digital payment. And it participates to build a strong ecosystem for digital ecosystem. We could have clients like Bolloré for the seaport, the Air Senegal for the for air tickets, even if they're locked down after that. Restaurants like KFC, etc. Money transfer from the agents decreased a lot in the beginning, but surprisingly has grown very fast in May and June. We're still wondering why, but it is growing very fast now since May and for May and June month. But even during lockdown, what we could see is that during lockdown hours, our agents were still doing transactions from home because they were bringing their devices at home. It was as simple as that. We saw that during lockdown time that they want to be able to do transactions, but they were still doing a bit less. But since we have a mobile platform, they are able to do that. We have also many agents that stopped doing transactions because the markets were shut, etc. But those who were doing transaction were doing more than they used to do before. That was also surprising. So what we did is also, because of lockdowns, we decided to launch a web platform to allow clients to do from home cash in and cash out on their wallet. Because if you want to still be able to do payments. If you can't cash in your your mobile money account, it's useless. It doesn't work. So we launched a platform, My Touch Point, and from this platform, people are able to do the cash in and the cash out, even access to some services like insurance, airtime, bill payment. We have also developed specific services for delivery people, because delivery is working more and more in countries in which we are, since people do not go to market, etc. They used to ask for delivery at home, but they need some tools for that. We succeeded to have agents that are mobile agents, that they can go to your house, they can do cash in for you, they can do cash out for you, and they can accept the payment if they have to deliver products like food, etc. So these are things we noticed and we did during this period.
Thank you very much, Omar, for this story of adapting to a pandemic and always making sure that we find alternatives to serve our customers. And like you mentioned earlier, most of these transactions are also remittance transactions. So this brings me to our next speaker, Bettina Ethers, who is the Senior Advisor for Global Migration Governance at the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. But before I ask my questions, Bettina, allow me to share a few statistics with the participants. Globally, an estimated 270 million people live and work outside their country of origin, including myself. This migration is in part a response to global macroeconomic trends many years in the making. Last year alone, migrants sent over 700 billion in remittances to their home countries. These flows not only act as household income for consumption and investment, but also support the need for critical forex flows in the financial system. However, migrants have been the hardest hit in this time of crisis. Remittance flows have usually been disrupted, and countries are facing an average decline of 20% in the remittance volume, as World Bank has projected. So, Bettina, can you please share with us the role of SDC played to respond to this crisis? Over to you.
Thank you, Sabine. I'm happy to do that. I hope everyone can hear me fine. First of all, let me thank UNCDF for inviting SDC to be part of this important webinar, and I'm happy to provide SDC's perspective on the part we work on in the whole dimension of financial inclusion, which is from a migration perspective and concretely on remittances. So on the crisis, SDC from the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic has been working with its partners, namely UNCDF, but also the World Bank, IO and UNDP, to mitigate the impacts, particularly on migrants. As the COVID-19 cases were growing, we came to realize that 75% of the migrants globally were working in countries where 3/4 of the coronavirus cases were reported. So that means that 90% of all global remittances were sent by migrants from these countries with the most corona cases. Therefore, a decline in remittances was imminent. And as Sabine, you've mentioned, in April then the World Bank projected the decline of 20% on the remittance flows, which amounts to $110 billion. This number is staggering because it's actually close to annual global ODA, and remittances usually amount to 3 times global ODA per year. So this is a very important and significant number, and considering that in past crises, such as also the financial crisis in 2009, but also in different natural disasters, remittances have been counter-cyclical and proved resilience to shocks, actually. And so the expected decline this year is bound to have a huge impact in the case of low and middle income countries, especially LDCs. So therefore, SDC has taken a number of steps alongside the United Kingdom, but also the aforementioned partner organizations, but also partners from private sector, namely the International Association of Money Transfer Networks and the International Chamber of Commerce. We launched a global call to action in mid-May, prompting policymakers, regulators, and private sector to take mitigation measures with the aim of keeping remittances flowing during the crisis. Addressing challenges in the adoption of digital channels is among the recommendations of the call to action. Since the launch, the call to action has received wide support from around 20 governments, from mostly low and middle income countries, particularly also small island developing countries, as well as multilateral organizations, private sector, and civil society. All of those are committed to taking action in this coalition that we have established. Through our multilateral partners, more on the operational level, we are supporting the governments in preparing for policy changes that have been long due in the pursuit of improving the digital ecosystem in the field of remittances. So in partnership with UNCDF, in particularly SCC is facilitating technical assistance to the private sector in strengthening the digital offerings where possible, while also investing in financial education and digital literacy of migrants and their families. The technical assistance also extends to designing new financial products and services that cater to the financial resilience and inclusion of migrants and their families. So in closing on this question, SDC is convinced that digitization will bring remittance transfer costs down and increase choices of migrants in their financial undertakings, hence improving the impact, productivity, and sustainability of remittances in line with the SDGs. Over to you, Sabine.
Thank you very much, Bettina, and thanks for the efforts led by the Swiss and the UK government. Those are much appreciated. You mentioned about the financial resilience and inclusion of migrants and their families. Within the broader discussion on migration, I mean, this is quite unique. So can you please share with us in a few words why SDC is focusing on this?
Happy to. So labor migrants face an array of challenges when leaving home and loved ones behind, among which financial obstacles are a huge challenge. Of course, not the only. The migrant experience is often accompanied by income volatility, uncertainty, and insecurity. SDC actually has a long tradition of working on the interrelations between migration and sustainable development. Two major areas SDC is focusing on are labor migration, including fair and ethical recruitment, but also enhancing contributions of migrants and diasporas to the development of their countries of origin. Our experience in these two fields yields that hard-earned income is often not efficiently and sustainably remitted due to volatile and costly transfer options. Additionally, few financial services are designed for migrant circumstances, and without the right financial tools to manage erratic income, expenses, and assets, the large and growing global cohort of labor migrants is effectively financially excluded and less resilient to income shock, like the COVID-19 crisis now currently underscores. The current crisis and the non-availability of any financial buffer, let alone social safety nets, prompting millions of migrants to return is definitely an important example here. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda recognize the positive contribution of migrants for inclusive growth and sustainable development. In particular, SDG 10 recognizes the developmental contribution of remittances from migrants in reducing inequality within and among countries. And as mentioned before, remittances exceed ODA, but also foreign investment in many low and middle income countries. But we have to ask whether we will be able to do so, reducing the financial inequality, unless we bridge the gap between remittances and the financial inclusion and resilience of these people and their families left behind. So at SDC, we actually look at remittances from a migration rather than a financial transaction perspective only. As such, remittances should not be considered as only a Forex transaction by the financial institutions on the sending or receiving end. Targeted efforts are actually required to move away from this monoproduct mentality of moving money from point A to point B, which misses a major opportunity, which is to deliver a fuller suite of financial products and services tailored to the needs of migrants and families. Remittances and the financial products linked to their transfer are a major vehicle to improve the labor migration experience of people, as well as the impact of remittances on individual livelihoods. Actually, when I was listening to Henri Domel, he actually made a good example of how migration can be beneficial in that regard. The example about the young man from Senegal whose migration experience within his own country improved not only his own livelihood, but also the well-being of his home community is a case in point. With the right framework, that means the right framework conditions in place, remittances act as an accelerator in achieving the SDGs, including poverty reduction, health, education, economic empowerment, but also very importantly, gender equality. On this point, an important priority of SDC is to ensure that the financial services produced, developed with partners, including UNCDF, are gender sensitive and take into consideration that almost half of the global migrants are women, and their contribution can be amplified if we design products keeping their financial and physical journey in mind. In closing, just a few more words. I'd like to say that through this crisis, coming back to where we started in my remarks, we have seen growth in digital channels like never before. We have also witnessed the biggest remittance companies acknowledging this need of a broad range of financial needs for migrants, such as micropayments, insurance, micropensions, and so forth. The recent example of Western Union partnering with AXA, a Swiss-based company, to offer migrant insurance is a welcome move from the industry that we applaud. I really hope more would follow suit in actually using this crisis as an opportunity to innovate the remittances market, thereby enhancing the financial inclusion and resilience of migrants and their families, and not least, enhancing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sabine.
Thank you very much, Bettina, for a perfect closing of this webinar. Allow me to pass on the floor to Karima for the Q&A session. Karima, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. First, I'd like to say that and thank again her honorary the Minister of ICT from Uganda, but unfortunately she had to leave. And the people who asked questions that were directly for her should probably have seen now in the Q&A section that her assistant provided some first answers. So I will skip those questions and focus on a couple because I'm also mindful of time. We only have a few minutes left before the end of the session. But so let me start with the first question. That is about infrastructure. And the question goes like this: how can we resolve the difficulty around digital infrastructure in countries in sub-Saharan Africa, basically? So maybe that's a question a couple of your panelists can answer.
Absolutely. Henri, would you like to start on this?
So, yes, thank you, Sabine. I think the kind of digital infrastructure is a key aspect to enable the kind of expansion and provision of digital solution, both finance and non-finance. And this is why, building an interoperable payment infrastructure is one of the pillars of our strategy, because we realized investing in that infrastructure and connectivity infrastructure is really a prerequisite to develop a range of solution, digital solution, both finance and non-finance. So I think it's a challenge we recognize and we're working on. I think also access to electricity is also a prerequisite to that, and providing a solution to off-grid electricity access, through clean energy and solar technology can also enhance, the ability to develop that connectivity. And it's something that we're working on with partners. I saw one of the questions from Uganda actually on that theme. So, but I will stop there and pass the floor to other panelists.
Bettina, Judith, would you like to add something to this question, or can we move to the next one? Okay.
Yeah, maybe we should move to the next one just to be mindful of time. The next one is, thank you, Henri. It's about skills and customer education. So, and it also relates to the adoption of the services. So how do we improve the skills of the end users of these services? And as a result, what can be done to help increase adoption?
Maybe I can take this one, Karima, just to give a specific example of what UNCDF has done currently in our youth portfolio. We are heavily investing in financial education and digital entrepreneurship curriculum that are deployed through a mobile application. So that gives customers on-demand ability to take these curriculum. There are audio and visual and in language. They are also available on a tablet, so trainers of trainers can use it within a savings group setting and visualize the content. We've also developed cartoons as a way to help educate consumers, focusing on financial education, digital literacy, and also digital entrepreneurship. So we see ourselves as UNCDF as facilitator of, onboarding these content on technology device so that we can scale the impact, and working with a vocational training, working with partners who can design the content with us, and then we leverage these tools. So I hope that answers the question. And to our all co-panelists, if you have something to share, please do not hesitate. Karima, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And then there's a question on gender. So how are the different participants in the panel incorporating a gender lens to their response to COVID-19? I think that's a question for everybody right now.
If you allow me, perhaps I will ask Judith if you would like to intervene here, and then we'll ask Bettina also.
I think we have lost. I think we have lost Judith Carl.
Okay. Bettina, in your interventions, you have mentioned the need for gender responsive services. You need to really integrate the gender lens as we look at half of the migrant population being women. Perhaps you would like to share with us your point of view on this question, please. Bettina, over to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because I'm somehow unable to unmute on my own, so I need someone from the organizers to do that. But thank you, it should work now. Yes, as I mentioned, through all our engagement on migration and development, but also beyond that, for SDC, gender equality is an important dimension of everything that we do. But especially with migration, and here I'm not speaking on remittances only, but it also, this is also true for the remittances field, when we zoom down, that the migration experience tends to be quite different if you're a man or a woman. And in fact, for many women, the experience can be negative in the sense that, and I spoke earlier on recruitment and malpractices when it comes to work standards, that women who are often doing domestic work, but this is not only true for women, of course. Let's think of the construction sector where mostly men work. The gendered sort of exploitation or abuse is very pertinent in migration, and oftentimes the lack of empowerment of women even sort of doubles that effect. But then on the other hand, the experience can also be very empowering for women. If they leave, they are the supporters of their families because they are the ones that send remittances. But then also when you turn it around, the women that are left behind with families by their husbands that go work abroad, it puts them in the position of sort of the main caretaker, the household, but also financial issues. And so it's incredibly important, not only on the sending, but also on the receiving end, to understand the perspective of women migrants or the women that are left behind, to empower them to, on the one hand, be financially literate, to know what their options are in sending remittances, but also in investing them, but also then alongside the financial empowerment, also empowering them to take a stand, you know, aside from their husbands and their families. Usually in traditional cultures and societies, women are not supposed to take care of these businesses. So the migration experience actually can be a very empowering experience if we all work together to recognize the specific needs that women have, and thus we can do a lot in empowering female migrants also in the financial sector, because women are more likely to invest in their children's education or in health, maybe more sustainable livelihood gains than possibly men would, because the perspectives are oftentimes different. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bettina. If I can quickly add, from UNCDF perspective, we believe that women are builders of the digital economy. And in that sense, we are investing in skills building via applications on digital literacy, on financial education and digital entrepreneurship. We're also on an inclusive innovation workstream standpoint. We've piloted in Zambia, actually, not long ago, a design sprint with the fintech ecosystem for solutions for women for financial services, and supporting also women entrepreneurs. And we, on the policy side, are actually advocating with policymakers for gender intentional policy, so that we can support the equal participation of women in these inclusive digital economies that leave no women behind. Thank you. Karima, over to you.
Yes, thank you. We have more questions, and there was one directed to SDC directly, but I propose that, to be mindful of time, that maybe we, maybe Bettina, if you see the question, you can maybe answer it there, and if not, we will answer it by email later on. There was still a question on EDIS and more details about how the scorecard is calculated. I propose that to answer that question also by email, we will share. So I just want to remind everybody that the recording will be shared tomorrow to all participants or all people who registered. And we will do our best to answer also by email the questions that we were unable to answer directly during the session. There's still a couple here that are pending. And with that, maybe Sabine, if you allow me, I'll just hand the floor and thank all the panelists and hand the floor to Henri for just maybe a couple of closing words before we close this session.
Over to you, Henri.
Thank you, Karima. Thank you, Sabine. So thank you all for participating to this webinar. I think it was a fascinating discussion. We could have spent hours, obviously, but I think it was interesting to see how, you know, digital transformation are changing both national economies, but also people's life in a very profound way. And I wanted to thank particularly our three panelists today, the Honorable Minister for ICT from Uganda, our partner from InTouch, and you, Bettina, as well, who has been SDC has been a very close partner for UNCDF, and we have worked together, as you mentioned, on this global call to action. I think that brought very complementary perspective of the kind of transformation through digital innovation, both on access to finance, but also access to basic services, which can really contribute to the SDGs and transform people's life. And I wanted to say, you know, as at CDF, we are committed to support that transformation. We realize that COVID-19 is accelerating the demand for deploying digital solutions, not only on finance, but also on the range of solutions which can improve people's life, enable social distancing, and at the same time, enable access to key services and opportunities. And we see that power in a range of areas, from education to health to entrepreneurship, growing business, access to e-commerce platform, access to clean energy solution, and of course, expanded access to a range of financial services. So I wanted just to say in conclusion that our strategy, leaving no one behind in the digital era, is really focused on supporting those transformation. We are deploying that strategy in more than 20 countries, and we're engaging in more countries in an ad hoc basis on those issues as well. And I think as we do that, we are putting at the heart of our focus a couple of elements. I mean, the first one is inclusion. I think technology is neutral, as we all know, and it can lead to exclusion as well to inclusion. We need to be proactive in how to make it inclusive. And this is why we are focusing, as you mentioned, Sabine, on digital capabilities so that people are empowered to use the solution, on really narrowing the gender gap and having a specific focus on women's ability to use and access those digital services. And Bettina, thank you for reminding us on the key importance of that in the context of migration. So inclusion is really the compass that, you know, we are keeping very closely and really wants to really position women as builder of inclusive digital economies, but also access for vulnerable population, whether they are migrant, refugees, forcibly displaced people, to a range of digital solutions. And the second aspect is measuring progress. I think, you know, as you mentioned, Sabine, earlier, you know, we are as good as what we can measure. And I think it's important to work with our private sector partners and government partners on how to measure progress around inclusive digital economies. And this is why it was, I think, useful to remind everyone of this tool that we're kind of developing with a range of partners and government partners especially. So the example of Uganda was also very interesting, and we're deploying that tool now in all the countries where we work. And you know, what we see as a vision is how to really leverage inclusive digital economy solution, building on the digital finance rail, which can really contribute to the SDGs, and how we can do that in the context where those needs are becoming more and more urgent with the COVID-19. So it's the beginning of a conversation. We could share with you much more example, but again, I think that was a terrific platform to start that discussion. And I wanted to thank you, Sabine, for moderating and the whole session, for our three panelists, for Judith, of course, for sharing this inspiring kind of direction at the beginning of the webinar, and for all of you participants for joining us. I know we run a little bit over time, but I think it was well worth it, and looking forward to the next engagements. Thank you, Sabine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Henri. Thank you, Bettina. Thank you, Omar. And thank you to all of the participants. Thank you, Karima and Lissandra, for all your support, and to our entire UNCDF team in the different countries that have contributed to the success of this webinar and the results that we are seeing into the countries in driving financial inclusion and digital inclusion. Thank you. Over to you, Karima.
Thank you, Sabine. And we will also be sharing some slides after this webinar with some extra resources. So thank you again. And with that, as we close, this will interrupt the session for everybody. So again, thank you, and have a nice afternoon, morning, depending on your time zone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.